here today with a retired Rear Admiral from the U.S. Navy. He is a former Special Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs and a Senior Director for International Organizations and Alliances at the U.S. National Security Council, Garry Hall. Garry, I'd like to welcome you to the Global Risk and Threat series.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
First, for those that are not familiar with the National Security Council, could you tell us a little bit about the makeup and basically your position and how you were appointed to this position?
Absolutely, thank you. Well, I was asked to join the National Security Council based on an extended network, and it was a process of about 5 months of vetting. And once I was vetted and my clearances were approved, I was asked to be a Senior Director for International Organizations and Alliances. And so in that role, I had immigration, migration, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, war crimes, genocide, and atrocity prevention, women and children's issues, fragile states and stabilization, governance, and UN peacekeeping, and international religious freedom. So a pretty big portfolio. So that was a portfolio that's considered a functional directorate. And the National Security Council right now is made up of about 320 individuals. Previous administration had about 450 members on the National Security Council, and General H.R. McMaster wanted to reduce that to about 320. And also make sure that the National Security Council was operational or strategic in its advice, not tactical in nature. So in other words, you provide policy, you don't necessarily carry out policy. So you have the National Security Council with 320 individuals on board. You have the regional areas which cover the globe by experts, and then the functional areas. And the challenge on the National Security Council is to make sure that regional directorates don't ignore functional directorates, and functionals don't ignore regional directorates. And the reason for that is every strategic decision or action has humanitarian consequences, and every humanitarian action has strategic impact.
Garry, could you also tell us a little bit about the process, how the National Security Council works, and with regards to policies, if something is brought up, what steps do we take?
That's an excellent question. Now, no matter who is in power at the White House, the National Security Council is basically going to operate in the same process. The National Security Council is the only interagency that can call a meeting of all other agencies and entities in Washington. So in other words, State Department officials can't call a meeting with CIA, FBI, Treasury, et cetera, where the National Security Council can. So I said there were 320 members on the National Security Council, approximately. Notionally, only about 12% are political appointees. And those are important to make sure that when policy is created, it's in alignment with the president's vision. So the rest of the members are experts in their field from all the interagency, from State Department, USAID, from FBI, CIA, Treasury, et cetera. You can go on and on. And so these young men and women, and I call them young, but in their professionals that have maybe about 10 or 15 years of experience, get appointed to the National Security Council. And so they join at the director level. So what we have is the Policy Coordination Committee process, which is abbreviated the PCC process. So if there is a need, whether it be regional or functional, directors will call meetings amongst the interagency at what we call the sub-PCC level. And they work out the issues of how a policy should be developed. And then once they get as far as they can along the process of creating a policy, they then elevate it to the Senior Director and Assistant Secretary level, which would be my level, and we would hold a PCC meeting. And then again, we would hash out the questions or processes of the director level, and then once we hammered that out, we would elevate it to the deputies level, where the deputy national security advisor would hold meetings with the deputies of agencies, the deputy secretary of state, things of that nature. And then once that is, then the national security advisor would have the actual National Security Council, which are the cabinet members and dignitaries, and meet with the president and say, this is the policy, and get his or her decision on the policy. So the process may take 6 months to a year to develop a policy. And so when people ask me what surprised you on the National Security Council, I always said two things. One, the caliber of federal employees that are at the directorate level, they're eye-watering. They're experts in their field, and they're dedicated to our government. And then the second thing that surprised me was the process, so vetted, so detailed, taking 6 months to a year. And then once the president announces a policy, it immediately gets attacked in the press or by others, you know. So it's the people that are in the fight that are developing the policy. And then of course there's always the critics. So, but that is the overall process that—
Very intricate process.
Yeah, and it's the same no matter what party is in power in the White House.
That's something actually that I think a lot of people don't really understand, and it's important. It's important really to see how detailed and how complex this whole process is. What can you tell us about the president's decision making? And I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of insights here. So if you could share with us a little bit.
Yes. No matter who's the president, whether it be George Bush 43 or President Obama or President Trump, you know, nobody ever gets to see how the president operates when in closed rooms. And I had the privilege of everything from having lunch with him with the UN Security Council to being in a few meetings in the Oval Office with him. And I'll tell you, one, he's the consummate gentleman and personable. And I mean, he jumps across the room to shake your hand. He's very outgoing. But what I discerned over my 2 years at the National Security Council, and I gave this advice to foreign diplomats and parliamentarians, and they found it very useful. And I break it down into two groups. And the first one is the president does not want to do the same thing and expect a different result. A great example of that is, you know, over 17 years or 18 years in the Middle East, the solution has always been, give us another $15 billion and another 15 months, and we'll solve the Middle East problem. The other example is not talking to dictators has not worked, but, you know, so why not try talking to them? The second one is he wants to be respectful of taxpayers' dollars. He doesn't want to spend money frivolously. He you know, as a construction guy, he understands the men and women that are breaking their backs to earn an income, and he doesn't want to spend their tax dollars frivolously. And third, he doesn't want to put anybody's lives at risk. You know, I recently saw articles that said, you know, everybody was worried that he would get us into another war. Well, I was in meetings with the UN Secretary General and the President, and he said, you know, Secretary General, do whatever you can do to make sure we have a peaceful outcome, a diplomatic outcome with North Korea was the topic at that time. He said, work with Ambassador Nikki Haley. We have a military solution, we always do, but we never want to do it because lives are at risk. So doesn't want to do the same thing, expect a different result, wants to be respectful of taxpayers' dollars, and doesn't want to put people at risk. So the other 3 points that I make is when you go in to see the president with an issue or a topic, the very first question he's going to ask you is, why is this important to the United States? Whether you're asking for troop movements or whether you're asking for money for a program, why is it important to the United States? And then the next question is, he says, how much is the United States paying for this issue? You know, again, being respectful of taxpayers' dollars. And then the third thing he asks is, what are others paying? And this goes to burden sharing. You know, an example would be NATO, making sure everybody is spending 2% of their GDP on defense. That's his basic process, how I discerned it on making a decision or dealing with his cabinet. balancing the supply chain and national security is very difficult. And one of the things for national security is when you look at all the counterfeit goods out there and the demand for them, coming from China, everything from counterfeit tailor-made golf clubs to Louis Vuitton purses. And a lot of people don't realize when they walk the streets of New York City and buy that counterfeit purse, that Louis Vuitton that they can't get anywhere else, that money is being funneled right back into terrorist organizations. And so we have to be very careful on, goods we buy.
And that's a really big issue. I think a lot of people don't understand that, and they don't understand, to them, they think of counterfeit as generic, and counterfeit is not generic. If we're talking about pharmaceuticals, counterfeit can kill. And if we're talking about luxury goods, they're not always the damaged goods. They're not always, there's different types of counterfeit. We have some counterfeits that are the ghost production, the phantom ones, where at night they turn the lights back on and they continue to produce the product that they have been actually contracted to produce. And so those products will look identical to the real thing. And a lot of people think, why not? They don't understand the ties. And that's a really important point that you're making, is the fact that when we're looking at supply chain, we need to understand where it's coming from. And are there these third shifts where products are continually being made? If so, that should be a concern for us because of national security. So that's a really, really important point.
And I think you also hit on drug manufacturing. And China has a complex supply chain to get drugs from the countries that have lax rules. And next thing you know, they're in Central America being sold to the United States, and we don't know where the origins of these drugs come from. In fact, while I was at the National Security Council, we had, I think it was the Center for Disease Control, had done tests on drugs that come from China, and they said every single drug they tested had elements of Viagra in it. And so what that means is that was a high demand pharmaceutical, and so they're mass producing it, and they're then making the next medicine in the same vats, and so you're not getting pure, clean, unadulterated medicine when you're getting it from a supply chain that goes back to China.
And that's a really important point. Another point is 90 or more than 90% of any drugs, any pharmaceutical product that you're buying on the internet can be counterfeit. A lot of people don't understand that, and to the extent your doctor or somebody is telling you to go on the internet and make sure that you buy from Canada, because of course, if you live up in New York, you can cross that border and get the medication at a relatively cheaper price. If you're doing it on the internet, though, what you have to realize is that just because it says it's made in Canada, or it has all the bells and whistles, I can write anything up and put it up there. It doesn't mean that that's actually what you have. And when you buy a counterfeit product, what you mentioned, it may have traces of some other medication. It may also be the wrong dose, not strong enough or too strong. And to the extent, for our elderly people, this is very, very dangerous, but also anybody who has any kind of a disease or any issues, because you build up a resistance to the drug, and then we create more issues.
People don't realize is that young woman next door can be groomed by folks that are going to abduct her and kidnap her and take her to a foreign country and then be sex trafficked. And this has happened in San Diego, it's happened in Texas, it happens on college campuses. You think you found Mr. Wonderful, and next thing you know, you're across the border, you're being either branded or tattooed. I mean, when I say something like that, people will go, oh, nobody's getting branded or tattooed. Yes, they are. And, these women that disappear are, especially also not only from the United States, but these refugee camps, young women just all of a sudden disappear. most of the international organizations have some sort of connection with the United Nations, and that can be a difficult situation in that many organizations, worldwide organizations, in their charter, they have persecution of Israel, that, we can do our business once Israel is eliminated. And so that's why the president has, removed us from some UN organizations. One of my favorite ones that the United States usually leads is the World Food Program. Right now, Governor David Beasley is head of the World Food Program. The United States provides most of the money to the World Food Program, and people don't understand how many people out there are subsiding through the World Food Program. In places like Lebanon, Jordan, refugees being taken care of. And one of the most difficult regions is Yemen. The war that's going on there, and the Yemenis are being literally starved to death in the process. And 3 million of them have subsided on World Food Program food for 2 years, and then another 3 million have subsided on World Food Program nutrition bars for 1 year. So you have 6 million people in Yemen that are living solely on World Food Program nutrition bars. And so the World Food Program isn't like your local church food bank. They set up a factory and they provide almost like a nutrition bar. And it's supposed to augment your meal. If you can only get certain foods or vegetables, this is supposed to give you the nutrition to keep you healthy. Well, in Yemen, 6 million people, that's their only food, is one daily bar of food. So if there's a problem with the food chain or the supply chain there, people will start dying rapidly in Yemen from malnutrition.
Can you talk to us a little bit about COVID-19 and how you see, I know that we have different states that have approached it differently, and you see spikes in some states and not in others. Within the United States, how do you view this pandemic?
Well, I think it's very challenging. I was just talking to one of my Naval Academy classmates this morning, and I said, COVID-19 is going to be like 9/11. I mean, here we're 17 years later, we're still taking our shoes off at the airport. This isn't like a blizzard or a natural disaster that the sun will come out and melt the snow or the seas will subside. What will be the turning point where we're not wearing masks or social distancing? So I think this is going to lead to a new way of life. And hopefully we can get through this without politicizing it. And as you say, the United States is 50 states with 50 governors, and each one of them has responsibility for their population. So to get a universal program is difficult. So, when will we be able to travel freely? When will we be able to socialize? Will it be a vaccine? So the answers to the questions on COVID-19, I don't think anyone has right now. The quarantine lockdown aspects of the pandemic are having a tremendous effect on people that aren't even affected by the virus. People are afraid to go to the hospital because we're all afraid of coronavirus or COVID-19. And so people are dying at home because they're not taking care of themselves. They're not, children aren't getting their vaccinations or getting, routine health care. So we've got to figure out, business going forward. How do we not scare people to death, but have them practice social hygiene and still get their medical treatment, hospital treatment, nutrition, et cetera. So that, I think, is a big challenge. So through our studies with mission readiness, we have realized that if you can get proper nutrition to a 1 to 5 year old, They are stable and steady and physically fit. They're ready to go to school, sit down and listen and learn and participate and be successful. So to get opportunity for all, we have to reach all the way back to childhood nutrition.
Garry, thank you so much for joining us and for providing us these insights that we rarely get to see. And stay safe. I look forward to speaking with you again and bringing you on once we are done with COVID.
Absolutely. This has been a fabulous program, and I've been honored to participate, and I hope that I've given you insights that maybe you haven't gotten elsewhere. But
You
thank
have.
you.
Thank you so much.